during Cohen's testimony before Congress last week, when he said he never had been to Prague. He also said that he has no direct evidence of Russia colluding with Trump. And the one thing that he's saying that I guess is being used to prop up the RussiaGate narrative is that Roger Stone told Donald Trump that he had advanced knowledge about the emails being released before they were released. But the silly thing about that as well is that WikiLeaks was actually publicly acknowledging that they were going to release that before Stone ever told Trump, right?
Right, yeah. No, I tweeted about this. If you're reading between the lines of that and you know about how Roger Stone operates, the dynamics there are probably somebody asked Stone to keep tabs on what's coming out about Hillary. And Stone proffered that he had some kind of connection to WikiLeaks, which, isn't necessarily hard to do. They've got a Twitter site and people do respond if you message them. But it's public knowledge that they're going to come out with something. They've been teasing it for a while now, and probably none of the morons in that room had any clue about that. And you could easily see a situation where Stone just says, "Yeah, no, my inside sources say it's coming out soon." When in fact, as it turns out, and we know this because it wasn't even alleged in Mueller's indictment of Stone that he had any kind of contact with WikiLeaks before that moment. They didn't allege that there was a phone call with Assange, which is part of Cohen's testimony. Assange is the most surveilled person on earth. If there had been a phone call, we would have known about it, but that's not in the indictment. So, yeah, these stories, they pop up, and the way I look at it is they're like fruit flies. They're designed to have very short lives. They live for a few minutes in the news cycle. They produce just enough to keep the story going, and then they fall apart a couple of days or weeks later. And I've been keeping the list since the beginning of this whole phenomenon. I've got over 50 stories that have been walked back or retracted since the beginning of this whole business. Everything from the 17 agencies agreed story, which turned out to be 4, to Russians hacked the Vermont utility, to the idea that Paul Manafort was working on an editorial with a Russian official while under house arrest. There's so many of these stories that we typically don't do is we don't go back and say, yeah, that wasn't true. The retractions tend to take place in conservative media, which is where none of the liberal audience sees. So it's just amazing. You just can't dent the story. It's impossible.
And it is funny because the retractions don't get much airplay. You have a lot of, kind of centrist folks out there who don't really pay attention that much to news, just being bombarded with the weight of the accusations and thinking, wow, this is really damning. There's a lot there, but they never see the other side of the coin where, all of this seems to just sort of be smoke and mirrors.
And some of it's just clear journalistic malpractice as far as I'm concerned. I mean, Greg Miller, I think he won a Pulitzer Prize, if I'm not mistaken, for the Washington Post. He wrote a book, and he went to Prague, and he had a team of reporters from the Washington Post, and he said that we went to every hotel. I'm going to find this quote for you. I got it right here. He said we went to every hotel. We sent reporters to every hotel in Prague all over the place just to try to figure out if he was ever here, and we came away empty. But that story never made it to the Washington Post. It was only picked up in the Daily Caller after C-SPAN happened to broadcast the speech that he gave about his book. Bob Woodward says, I didn't find evidence of espionage or collusion. That didn't come out in any of the publicity about his book about the Trump administration. It only came out in an interview with Hugh Hewitt. So all this stuff that's positive is out there, but it's not. It's in places where people who are centrists for the most part, who watch MSNBC, read the New York Times, the Washington Post, they don't see any of it, so they don't know, which is incredibly frustrating.
Did The Guardian ever walk back their claim that Manafort had met with Assange?
No, they put out, if I'm not mistaken, a kind of a sort of softening language. A couple of days later, they started adding words like "according to," as they toned it down a little bit.
Didn't they edit the article without announcing that they were doing that?
Yeah, which that happens. I'm not going to say that that's 1,000% unethical. It's a little weird when you fundamentally change the meaning of the story.
Right.
But in this case, what they were clearly trying to do was sort of dull the aggressive tone of we know about this. And, that story had a profound impact. As a result of that story, and this actually hasn't come out yet, I'm sort of working on the reporting of this now, but, the United States, we send investigators to interview all the personnel at the Ecuadorian embassy to try to get information that meeting ever happened between Assange and Manafort. So that story, which was based on God knows what source, and it seems so unlikely. I mean, it's not that it's impossible, but the idea that, again, Julian Assange is the most watched person on human Earth on the planet. If Paul Manafort had walked into that embassy at any point in recent history, there would have been written records of it. There would have been CCTV footage in London, and none of that has popped up now. Now they haven't retracted the story, which by itself is a little weird, but it had an impact nonetheless, and most people don't know yet to distrust it.
Well, the thing about Cohen being in Prague was that his cell phone was being pinged there, or it was giving a signal from Prague, right?
Well, that was one version of the story. The other version was that somebody mistook one Michael Cohen for another. And so that had something to do with somebody by that name with a passport just being in the city. Look, this all gets back to the same root problem, which is the Steele report was not prepared by a journalist. It was prepared by a private opposition researcher who had an intelligence background. And what do those people do? They compile raw rumors. They put them into a big document. Now, in theory, you definitely want your intelligence to be as accurate as possible, but there's no, you're going to get fired or sued if you put an unfounded rumor in an intelligence document. So he prepares this whole thing that's got all this wild stuff in it, the idiot Carter Page supposedly getting offered a 19% stake in a $63 billion oil company if he could get Russia to overturn sanctions. I mean, that claim was actually repeated by Adam Schiff in his opening statement in the House. And I was so stunned watching that I contacted Schiff's office and I said, did you guys do anything to try to check or verify any of the stuff in the Steele report before you said that? And they're like, no, we look forward to talking to Mr. Steele and to try to substantiate or refute his allegation. In other words, they didn't investigate it before they said it. And this is what everybody is doing. The Steele report is like the Magna Carta of this whole thing, and its core allegations we can't reproduce the results independently in a lab because we don't know what the sources are. So it's all been a trick. It's a journalistic end run. This is the kind of thing that short sellers do. If you're betting against a stock, you get an investment bank to do a negative research report, and you hand that to the FBI, and then as soon as the FBI takes it, you tell a reporter, oh, it's under investigation. The company's under investigation. That gets published. The stock goes down. Everybody wins. It's an old trick, this stuff. The same you do it in politics, too. Bob Menendez in New Jersey. It happened with Whitewater. All this stuff is driven by unconfirmed private research reports, which you can't publish unless you're talking about who's receiving the reports, right? You can say the FBI is investigating. You can say somebody looked at it, and that gets you around the problem of the core allegations being confirmed.